Well, dear friends, peace be with you. Wonderful to be here, to be back here. Thank you so much, Kozan, for welcoming me here, and Noah and some friends who are here. And a big shout out to Roshi, who's up in the cloud somewhere in the Hermitage. The last time I saw Roshi, just before the pandemic, we were in jail together, as you do. That's just part of the practice. Have they told you that yet? No, you're going to love it. And that was about my 90th arrest. And we had gone to Washington, D.C. to shut down the U.S. Senate office building to demand action on behalf of the climate. Thank you very much. And there were 1,000 people, and Roshi and Jane and Gloria Steinem and Dolores Huerta and Reverend Barber and me and lots of good friends. But the thing was, and I don't even know where the camera is, so I'd look at Roshi and say, but Roshi, what I remember, oddly enough, was the joy of that day. And that's just what's so spectacular, that if you're doing the practice and you're going deep, deep, deep into peace, and then you go public and cross a line and take risks, even if they arrest you and threaten prison with you and jail, as I've spent a year in my life behind bars, or kill you, you can go to your death and joy. So I've not seen Roshi. I'm not sure she's actually out of jail. She is. I'm trying to cheer you all up and make you laugh. She's the big eye in the corner. Hi, Roshi. Thank you for welcoming me. So I thought I'd call tonight Living Peace, Practicing Nonviolence, which is what I've been talking about all my life. And I have a lot of nerve saying anything in front of all you holy bodhisattvas. I just have some points to offer. And if they're helpful, great. If not, that's okay. But the question is, how are you doing on the path of peace? Where are you on the path of peace? And I use the Gandhian Kingian language of nonviolence. Where is nonviolence touching you? In other words, where are you still nursing your violence and participating in the insane world of violence? Isn't that what the practice is all about? Is to deepen into nonviolence. And so I love this language of the path or the way, or A.J. Musty's phrase that there is no way to peace. Peace is the way, or that others say it's not spiritual perfection. That's not what we're about. It's spiritual progress. It's every step is peace. Peace is every step, as Ty would say. So the pandemic came, and I had just left New Mexico and moved out to Big Sur, and our great work at Los Alamos got canceled. And I was a big student of Thai and Pema Chodron, but Pema wrote a really great book. I don't know if you've all read it. It was originally called No Time to Lose. She renamed it Becoming Bodhisattvas, which is a line-by-line commentary, I think, on Shanti Deva's great work. Have you all studied that? Fabulous book. And so this was, so I was trying to do that with the Gospels. And I went through Matthew, Mark, and Luke, 3 of the 4 Gospels about Jesus, from a Gandhian, Kingian hermeneutic of nonviolence. Because I'm trying to impress him and it's not working. That's just a big old fancy theology word that just means perspective. Going through every sentence in the story of Jesus saying, Jesus is more nonviolent than Gandhi, Dorothy Day, Dr. King, and Thich Nhat Hanh combined. This is helpful because Christians are insane. They all think Jesus wants them to kill for America. Gosh. So that's what someone said, so well, you know how you spent the pandemic. And it came out in January, and I went on a 75 city speaking tour. And I'm just finishing it, but I saw Kozan along the way. He said, well, you have to come here and talk. So my kind of mantra during the pandemic was, I love these words. And you can just breathe them in and make them yours too. universal love, universal compassion, universal peace. Are there any questions? Isn't it great? I mean, I just kind of can meditate on those. But see, I don't think any of those words work anymore. Because once in all our years of vigiling and sitting in sackcloth and ashes up at Los Alamos, once I spoke to the high school in Los Alamos. Imagine those poor kids living in a radioactive dump. It's the highest cancer rate in the world up there. More millionaires per capita than any other place on the planet. It's the most radioactive place, way worse than Chernobyl. The students in the high school, all their parents build nuclear bombs, and they're very devout Christians, said to me, we're the greatest peacemakers on the planet. We are the people of peace on the planet, because if we don't have 35,000 nuclear weapons to blow up the planet 30 times, we're doomed. What? Love, so nonviolence, this Gandhian Kingian word, I really invite you to use it and teach it. And my impression of Upaya, and so forgive me, Roshi, because I've said this every time, is that you are in a high-end postdoctoral training camp of total nonviolence. How am I doing? You're not liking that. It's just a fancy way of talking about universal love, universal compassion, universal peace. So begging your permission, what I once, like 10 years ago when I was here, I talked about a new book I had written called The Nonviolent Life. And I've been talking about nonviolence my whole life. You know, Gandhi is the first one to really take it to the world. The old Jainist word, ahimsa, remember? You all know this better than me. Do no harm in thought, word, or deed, right? You're all experts at that. You're never going to hurt another human being ever again for the rest of your life. You're never going to say a harmful word toward another human being ever again for the rest of your life. You're never going to think a harmful thought toward another human being ever again for the rest of your life. How's that going for you? That's why we're here. If that's not the point, I don't know. That's what Gandhi said. And Jesus and Buddha didn't have this great word the way Gandhi did, because he's working with it in South Africa. And then he goes, oh my God, this is a whole new way of life. This is the spiritual life. This is the spiritual path. No, this is the politics of God or Buddha, or the politics of the spiritual life, what it means to be a true human being. That the only way positive social change happens in human history, from Buddha and Jesus to Dorothy Day and Dr. King and Gandhi and Rosa Parks, so forth, is bottom-up people power grassroots movements. So in my book, The Nonviolent Life, I was pitching that this holistic nonviolence, visionary nonviolence, the whole big thing, which is what you and I want. We're tired of all this fooling around. We're going to rise to Gandhi, King, Dorothy Day level, okay? Just say yes. Yes. It's not working. But anyway, the only way to do that kind of holistic nonviolence is 3 simultaneous attributes, to do all 3 at the same time. Total nonviolence to yourself for the rest of your life. That's the inner journey. You're not going to cooperate with your own inner violence ever again. We're all wounded, and we're all victims of violence. But we're not going to be wounded wounders. We're going to be wounded healers, and we're going to participate in our practice in the disarmament of our heart and letting go of all resentment, anger, hate, inner violence, beating up on ourselves, whatever it is, and do our inner journey to create a space for peace to dwell within us, to make peace with ourselves, to cultivate interior nonviolence. Okay, while you're doing that, at the same time, number 2, practicing meticulous interpersonal nonviolence toward every person you ever meet, every person on the planet, and let's not stop there, all the creatures and Mother Earth. How's that going for you? I'm not even going to talk about that because I've talked about that many times here before. And the way I always look at that is we go, oh, yeah, that's fabulous. I'm all for that. As someone said to me in a big church gathering 20 years ago during the war in Iraq, a very sweet elderly woman stood up and said, this stuff on nonviolence is fascinating. It's really interesting. And peace, me personally, I'm a big fan of peace. Big fan. But sometimes you just got to kill somebody. She's just saying what we all think. So who is the difficult person in your life? Or some of us have a couple hundred. And to see that person is your guru of nonviolence because they're exposing your violence. And you get to live out the journey of practicing nonviolence with that person. Universal love, universal compassion, universal peace. You're not going to be able to stand up and speak against nuclear weapons and fascism and climate change if you can, and be ready to stand out publicly, and you're going to get it. People are going to say things to you. If you're not doing your inner work and your inner relationships, it's going to trigger you when you want to be a public person for peace. But the third attribute, at the same time, you have to have one foot in the global grassroots, bottom-up, people power movement of peace that is for justice, disarmament, and creation. I think you have to now. As Romero said, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And I'm presuming everybody here is doing their inner work, presuming everybody has a practice, presuming everybody is working on their nonviolence, interpersonal skills. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the third attribute tonight, Kozan, if that's okay, begging your permission. This idea of the movement. And the way it's really Thich Thay's original idea of engaged Buddhism, or becoming bodhisattvas, or better yet, the politics of being a bodhisattva. Is that working for you? No, it's not working for you. Okay. Being part of that global bottom-up grassroots movement, but bringing your practice to it. Because as Kozan was saying, that's surely what we need. For those of you who are involved in justice and peace and disarmament creation work, thank you. And keep at it with as much love as you can and nonviolence, and teach activists who are not spending the time doing the inner work that you are, to bring all of that to them. That's been a lot of my life work. And just for the record, to say the world is getting insaner by the minute. You know, we just where do we begin? Permanent warfare. God, we just say names: Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan. All of Africa is about to break out in civil wars all over the place. And the US spends more money, if you study the Pentagon budget, on warfare in Africa, and nobody talks about it. But racism and sexism, and torture, executions, 8 people have more money than 5 billion people. Extreme poverty, 800 million people in hunger. You know all of this. But there's still 13,000 nuclear weapons, and we're closer to nuclear war than we've ever been since 1962. Hands down, everybody agrees. It could happen any day, and don't be shocked. And because of our war on Mother Earth, climate change. I don't know if you all read that big report in the New York Times last week. You know, all the scientists have been saying for about 15 years, 2030 is the year. Well, this last week they did their kind of, where are we today? Holy Toledo, they're saying, you're going to notice the global shift. It's going to happen in the next few years. All these storms or the heat are suddenly, now that's reality, permanent. And you're going to notice it. It's going to full on hit us. Did you see 10 days ago it was hotter in the Arctic Circle than Florida? You didn't see that. You didn't know that. Why is not anybody talking about that? Isn't that, it's just, I mean, we could all talk about these things. Of course, this is fascism. All of this is why Dr. King said the night before the government killed him, the choice is not, this is Martin's word, not violence or nonviolence. It's not what we're talking about. It's nonviolence or non-existence. Unless the whole human race personally adopts nonviolence and organizes the new cultures of nonviolence, we are doomed to our global addiction to violence and death as a social methodology. Everything Martin said is coming true. And this is what you and I are about. This is what you and your chaplaincy. Everything is to be bodhisattvas, but not just for ourselves or the Sangha, but to go forth. So maybe I'll just start with my few points. I only have 5 or 10 pages single space here. So you're spared the 600-page book. I'm trying to make you laugh and it's not working. But again, I am presuming that you're with me on a Gandhian, Kingian way of understanding life. That once you begin to look at life from the lens, the perspective of Gandhian holistic nonviolence, which Martin took even further, and we have to go way beyond those two teachers. And in fact, we are. There's more happening about nonviolence now on the planet than ever before in history. It's actually very hopeful and very desperate time at the same time, oddly enough, I think. But I'm presuming, and I'm just going to come right out and say it, because I came here because I was just speaking up at Ghost Ranch for 5 days at a national gun violence prevention conference, which was very exciting and lots of energy, really great. You all would have loved it. That you got to get rid of your guns. I'm just saying. Martin Luther King was in Montgomery preaching nonviolence for the first 6 months and sleeping with a handgun under his pillow until the FOR came down and said, no, Martin, if you're going to practice and teach nonviolence, you can't have a gun. It doesn't work that way. So you have to really draw on your inner strength and the Sangha. And I think you have to quit the military. And you have to talk all your friends and neighbors and kids and relatives out of the military. And you have to quit your jobs at Los Alamos and invite everybody you know who works there to quit. That's what I've been doing as a priest. It hasn't gone over well. It's very exciting. Even when you have your own parishioners kick you out and issue death threats, you know you're making progress on the path of peace. I'm still trying. So here's a few points. So my first point is just to always so on that third attribute, to have 1 foot of your life involved in the ground, bottom-up peace, this movement for justice, discernment, creation. And I'm not telling you what to do, but do tie some of your time to the global movement. I think it's a requirement of being a human being there. We can't sit back while the world is being destroyed. At best, we might be able to help some people survive nonviolently or sow some seeds for a harvest of peace that you and I will never live to see. And that's okay. You know, it's the means or the end. There's this great teacher who we brought here to speak. I don't know if you met her, Kozan, in 2015, Erica Chenoweth from Harvard, who has done more work than anybody in history. She raised millions of dollars, hired this massive social science team, published this big, massive book, which is like reading a phone book or a physics manual, studying with social science research every conflict, tyranny, oppression, violence, war, revolution from 1900 to 2006, proving that where organized nonviolence was tried, it worked and led to more nonviolent outcomes and nonviolent, long-lasting democracies. And there have been 85 nonviolent revolutions or national transformations since Dr. King's death. It's very exciting. And you just don't hear anything about it. But if you want to go deep into this, go read Erica Chenoweth. Her book is called Why Civil Resistance Works. But what I was writing here in this book, and this is, to me, the heart of it, is that Jesus teaches spectacular nonviolence in the Sermon on the Mount, which Gandhi called the greatest writings of nonviolence in history, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Then he models it and organizes a grassroots movement from Galilee to Jerusalem. And no one ever talks about that. It's a classic 1930s labor movement organizing in Luke 10. No, it's just like Gandhi marching 270 miles in the Salt March and picking up salt and bringing down the British Empire. Or Martin marching from Selma to Montgomery and in effect bringing down segregation and beginning a new era which we're trying to dismantle. That's why I always say Jesus thinks he's Gandhi. I can't say that, cousin. Jesus thinks he's Martin Luther King. Okay, never mind. So in the text, it says he gathers 72 disciples, sends them ahead in pairs. This is the gospel way of active nonviolence. And I'm saying this because we all have to be part of it. I call it the Galilee 72. And he says, go on your way. I'm sending you on as lambs into the midst of wolves. On bad days, I think Christians misread that and thought they were supposed to be wolves going into the midst of lambs, but I better not say it. You know what I mean? A lamb into the midst of wolves. It's very graphic language of Kingian Gandhian nonviolence. Well, that's what Jesus and Buddha were teaching. But Jesus is in-your-face movement, and he says you're to do three things, which is I put at the heart of this book. Number one, you're to heal all the victims of imperial violence. Well, that's everybody now. We're all victims of the culture of violence, however you name it, all of us. We heal one another. That's what you're doing. Second, you're to expel the demons of violence. Well, that's what you're all doing too. And so it goes on. You don't have to be part of the NRA anymore. You're free. You're free. You're free not to have a gun. You don't have to do it, man. You're free of the Republican Party. You're free of the Democratic Party. You're free of America. You're free of the military. You're free in the new life, the freedom of peace, which has a boundary line. There is no cause, however noble, for which you and I will ever again support the taking of a single human life. We don't kill people. We don't kill people who kill people to show that you shouldn't kill people. We don't plan to blow up the planet to stop all those crazy people. It's not just live and let live. It's giving our lives to stopping the killing, to live and help live. Well, that's movement. And the third thing Jesus said is you're to proclaim the reign of God is at hand. It's very important to talk about another world as possible, is to say a new world without war or violence or killing. I remember, and they all come back rejoicing, and Jesus starts rejoicing. And it's the only time in the four Gospels where the poor, nonviolent Jesus is happy. I kid you not, it's not. It's the only, because people were building bottom-up movement. And I just invite you to, where are you in this story of movement building? You don't have to do everything, but you got to pick a cause if you're not. So, well, to say a word, well, I've got a couple other thoughts. I got a few minutes left. You know, how are you part of the movement, and how do you bring your practice to the grassroots movement? Secondly, my teacher was Daniel Berrigan, who was very prominent with his brother Phil against the Vietnam War. And I lived and worked with him for 30 years, and I'm his executor now. He died in 2016. The day I met him, he said this amazing sentence. It's not that we're political, it's that we go public with our love for the human race. Isn't that disarming? Do you see the subtle difference? We take our bodhisattva practice and go public with it. Universal love, universal compassion, universal peace. How do you engage publicly this culture, this insane culture of violence and war? You know, and when you're speaking publicly, to do it as much nonviolence and love as possible. Very important. My other teacher, my third point, is Cesar Chavez said to me late one night, just before he died, I said, if I'm ever speaking to people and they say, well, what can we do? What should I say? And Cesar Chavez said to me, John, tell everybody for the rest of your life, public action, public action, public action. Always engage in some public action, however you're moved, for something for justice, for disarmament, for creation. That's what Roshi and I were doing with Fire Drill Fridays. It's beautiful teaching. So this weekend at Ghost Ranch, we were organizing the churches. I can't say it with a straight face. Organizing the churches to speak out and be a force to stop gun violence. Wish us luck. There are 500 million guns in the United States now. With 44,000 people were killed by guns last year. 27,000 of them were suicides. 20,000, whatever, something like that, were murders, and so forth and so on. And there's tools, and we're learning so much, especially from the Parkland students, who are amazing, how within 6 weeks they just organized, and they got 2 million people in over 800 cities to march against gun violence. High school kids. That's a challenge to all of us. And there's a great new movement happening called Guns into Garden Tools. It started 20 years ago by some friends of mine. And I think, Kozan, it'd be fun someday to do it at Upaya because they're based in Denver. And now they're swamped. And that is, while you're having a little conference or a gathering or a retreat, they pull up with all their blacksmith equipment. And they're being inundated after decades now of working with the police and the FBI around the country. The police are calling them and saying, we just collected another 1,000 guns. Would you like them? And so at our conference, which only had 75 or 80 people over the weekend, we all took turns and we cut apart and hammered 300 guns, automatic machine guns, semi-automatics, into garden tools. It's fantastic. And it's symbolic, but it's actually real. But there's even something spiritual that happens to people, especially those who are survivors of gun violence, to actually do that. I think that's very exciting. Environmental groups, there's so many things to be part of these days. Nuclear weapons. 2 weeks ago, we had an amazing vigil at Vandenberg Space Center, which is south of Big Sur, where I live, where they're planning to put all the radioactive material around the planet and satellites. And they continue to practice sending bombs into the South Pacific for the great war to come with China, which is what they're all focused on. And some of us were arrested there, but it was very empowering to go there. And I've been helping and working with Archbishop Wester of Santa Fe, who's now suddenly merged as one of the great voices for nuclear disarmament on the planet. I don't know if he's spoken here, but I hope you'd invite him one day. And he asked me to write his pastoral letter, which came out 2 years ago, about New Mexico has to be ground zero for nuclear disarmament. It's amazing. And now I can't stop him. He's kind of speaking all over the country and the world, and he's gone to Hiroshima several times and wants me to go with him next year for the 80th anniversary. I've never been, as you know, because I'm an ex-con and I have 3 or 4 felony convictions. And according to the Japanese Constitution, US convicted felons are never allowed for the rest of their lives into Japan. Apparently, though, now I can run for president, but I better not go there. Action, housing the homeless, welcoming the immigrant, visiting the prisoner, the politics of inclusivity. So exciting. Making peace with everyone. What can we do to help stand up and say no to the culture of permanent warfare and military spending, to the weapons manufacturers and the gun manufacturers who care less about anything? There's billions to be made in killing people. Well, we can call for a ceasefire in Gaza and Ukraine and Sudan and everywhere, and continue to teach nonviolence, nonviolent conflict resolution as the spiritual life, as part of our practice. I'll say 5. A point that I've been thinking about, number 4, is fearlessness. As the country is going to be collapsing and getting worse, as we're moving deeper into fascism and catastrophic climate change, which is going to change our lives, Not only are we working deeper than ever in our nonviolence and building grassroots communities of nonviolence and grassroots movements, that has to mean, it's in the Sermon on the Mount and was critical for Gandhi, really moving into total fearlessness, as well as angerlessness, as well as anxietylessness. I'm making up words here. You never worry again. You have no more resentments. You let it all go. But Gandhi said you cannot practice nonviolence if you have a trace of fear in you. And I think that's very important as things are getting crazier, that we all need to continue to monitor our fears and journal about it. Our fear of death, but the lesser fear, reputation, money, health, really to learn to let go. I find that very powerful. And so to spend time with our fears and befriend our fears as part of the vocation to be peacemakers. This is just very important to me. And not to be afraid, and to encourage each other not to be afraid, and to find in your Sangha strength from people who are having good days to let go of your fear. And when you're having a good day, to help those who are afraid, that we can help one another. Another key ingredient in all of this is forgiveness. Really, really, really moving deep inside into total forgiveness. I'm talking about holistic nonviolence here, living peace. Well, I think that means forgiving everyone who ever hurt you. About 500 times a day. Jesus said only 490 times. Actually, that's what he said, 70 times, 7 times a day. So this is your practice. And there's no moment where you're free of the hurts and wounds and grudges and resentments that you carry. But there is a freedom of letting go into a deeper peace that you didn't know was possible. But you and I want to apply this. What are the social, economic, and political implications of forgiveness? South Africa was inventing new practices. And my friend, forgive me for name dropping, was Desmond Tutu. And I spent a lot of time with him. And with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, not only did everybody have to work, I'm talking about the Black South African people on forgiving white people, but how do you organize that nationwide? We haven't even begun that. Forgiveness for what? Genocide, the Civil War, the Klan, Hiroshima, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, poverty, the racism in the US, and so forth and so on. That's why I just mentioned that, because we're talking about social compassion, restorative justice, social, national, global reconciliation. 7, a point for me, to be faithful to this path, almost to be faithful to the bottom-up grassroots movement of nonviolence. You're going to meet a lot of broken, crazy, wild activists like me. And now you get to be really nonviolent, working with them. I'm trying to make you laugh, but obviously you've been involved in the movement. I like Edna St. Vincent Millay. She had that great poem, I shall die, but that is all I shall do for death. So we're going to be like this for the rest of our lives on this path. And I just think it's critically important. And so before he died, Martin Luther King's, the week before he was killed in Memphis, for the first time started to talk about hope. And he gave his first ever statement on hope. And he said, my definition of hope is the final refusal to give up. I think that's a very profound teaching, that we're going to stay with the grassroots movement in our practice. We're going to be faithful to the journey. And what's real, as I get older, and I met so many great peacemakers around the planet, what moves me the most is not the people who did great periodic things, but the people who just did it for the rest of their lives. And as Howard Zinn told me, if you study all the movements of social change, from abolitionists and suffragists to labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and then all this explosion of nonviolent movements from women movement, LGBT, environment, now that's all over the world. Change happens in the end because ordinary people kept at it, doing 1, 2, or 3 things every day, knowing they were not going to live to see the victory they wanted. You do it anyway, and then at some point, nonviolence becomes contagious. And Joan Baez has a whole teaching about how it's organic, ultimately. Maybe, well, another point that's big for me is the imagination. That we're so sick now. We've lost the imagination. No one can imagine New Mexico without nuclear weapons, or poverty, or racism, or war. Imagine a world without war. No, that's what we're about. Reclaiming the imagination for peace and to say it publicly. A new world is coming. No more war, no more killing, no more nuclear weapons, no more racism, no more hunger, no more sexism, no more torture, no more executions, no more destruction of the creatures or of Mother Earth, where everyone is nonviolent. Of course, everyone's going to have food, clean water, housing, healthcare, jobs, employment, dignity, and with the infinite trillions left over, because that's totally doable, you educate every human being in the methodology of nonviolent conflict resolution. Everybody is on the journey of becoming a bodhisattva. So being faithful to this is what we need. Maybe the last point will be, well, what I'm writing now is about surrender. As I get older, that's what I'm learning about living peace and practicing nonviolence. The only way to do that is total surrender to peace, or the spirit of peace, or the God of peace. And that means letting go of your life. And that means walking into the unknown. Of course, we're every day, one day at a time, peaceful. But I mean, permanent liminal space, letting go of our ego and controlling others, and then figuring out what it will be like to live out the social and political implications of surrender to the spirit of peace, or universal peace, or the God of peace. And so my closing thought is being peace, doing peace, making peace equals living a new life of peace and nonviolence.